The year 2008 saw the world plunge into the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. It all started with a housing bubble in the United States. Banks gave out loans known as mortgages to people with poor credit. These risky loans were then bundled together and sold off as investments. When house prices started to fall, these investments became worthless. Financial institutions, heavily invested in these toxic assets, teetered on the brink of collapse. Fear gripped the markets, and lending froze. The global economy ground to a halt. Governments and central banks around the world took unprecedented measures to avert a complete meltdown. They injected trillions of dollars into the financial system and bailed out failing banks. The crisis led to a deep recession, with millions losing their jobs and homes. The events of 2008 exposed deep flaws in the global financial system and highlighted the dangers of unchecked risk-taking. It was a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of the global economy and the devastating consequences that can arise when financial markets spiral out of control. At the heart of the crisis were subprime mortgages. These were home loans given to borrowers with poor credit histories and low credit scores. Lenders, eager to cash in on the booming housing market, relaxed their lending standards. They offered mortgages with low initial interest rates, often with no down payment required. These teaser rates were temporary, and monthly payments would balloon after a few years. Many borrowers, enticed by the prospect of homeownership, took on more debt than they could afford. They were ill-equipped to handle the higher payments when the teaser rates expired. Adding fuel to the fire were credit default swaps, or CDSs. These were essentially insurance policies on these risky mortgages. Investors bought CDS to protect themselves from potential defaults. However, the market for CDS became enormous and highly leveraged. When the housing bubble burst and defaults soared, the sellers of these CDS, like insurance giant AIG, couldn't cover their obligations. The financial system, interconnected through these complex instruments, began to crumble. What seemed like a safe bet turned into a cascade of losses, threatening to bring down the entire global economy. The collapse of Lehman Brothers in September 2008 was a defining moment in the financial crisis. Lehman, a venerable investment bank, had taken on huge risks, investing heavily in subprime mortgages and other complex financial instruments. As the housing market collapsed, Lehman's investments turned toxic. The bank found itself unable to meet its financial obligations and was forced to file for bankruptcy. Lehman's demise sent shockwaves through the global financial system. It highlighted the fragility of the interconnected financial world and triggered a crisis of confidence. Banks became wary of lending to each other, fearing that their counterparties might also be on the verge of collapse. Credit markets froze, businesses couldn't get loans, and the global economy shuddered to a halt. The fall of Lehman Brothers was a stark reminder of the systemic risks inherent in the financial system and the potential for a single failure to trigger a domino effect. Section 4. Main Street suffers job losses, foreclosures, and a vanishing safety net. The financial crisis quickly spread from Wall Street to Main Street. With credit markets frozen, businesses large and small struggled to obtain the financing they needed to operate. Layoffs soared as companies were forced to downsize or shut down altogether. The unemployment rate in the United States skyrocketed, reaching 10% by late 2009. Millions of Americans lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings. The housing market collapse led to a wave of foreclosures. Millions of families were evicted from their homes as they could no longer afford their mortgage payments. The crisis exposed the precarious financial situation of many American families. Years of stagnant wages, rising healthcare costs, and easy access to credit had left many living paycheck to paycheck with little to no savings. The recession wiped out what little financial security many families had, leaving them vulnerable and struggling to make ends meet. Section 5. Government intervention, bailouts, stimulus, and the road to recovery. Faced with a deepening crisis, governments around the world took unprecedented steps to stabilize the financial system and avert a complete economic collapse. In the United States, Congress passed the Troubled Asset Relief Program, authorizing the Treasury Department to inject $700 billion into the financial system. The government used these funds to bail out failing banks, insurance companies, and automakers. These bailouts were controversial, but they were seen as necessary to prevent a complete meltdown of the financial system. In addition to the TARP, the government also implemented a $787 billion economic stimulus package. This package included tax cuts, infrastructure spending, and aid to state and local governments. The goal was to boost demand, create jobs, and stimulate economic growth. These government interventions, while massive and unprecedented, were credited with preventing a second Great Depression. However, they also led to soaring budget deficits and increased national debt, the long-term consequences of which are still being debated today. Section 6. A Changed World. The long-term impact on the global economy. The 2008 financial crisis has had a profound and lasting impact on the global economy. The crisis exposed fundamental flaws in the global financial system, highlighting the dangers of excessive leverage, deregulation, and the interconnectedness of financial markets. It led to a loss of trust in financial institutions and a reassessment of risk. In the aftermath of the crisis, governments around the world implemented stricter financial regulations, such as the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act in the United States. These regulations aim to strengthen the financial system, increase transparency, and protect consumers. However, the debate continues over whether these regulations go far enough to prevent future crises. The crisis also led to a shift in global economic power. Emerging markets, particularly in Asia, recovered more quickly from the crisis than developed economies. This has led to a rebalancing of